The Cocoon by John B. L. Goodwin. Whereas downstairs his father had a room, the walls of which were studded with trophies of his aggressive quests, heads of ibex, chamois, eland, kateloa, peccary, and ounce. Upstairs, Denny had pinned upon his playroom walls the fragile bodies of swallowtails, nymphs, fritillaries, meadow browns, and angel wings. Although his father had maneuvered expeditions, experienced privation, waded through jungles, climbed upon crags for his specimens, Denny had blithely gathered his within the fields and gardens close to home. It was likely that his father's day as a collector was over. Denny's had just begun. Denny was 11, and his father 46, and the house in which they lived was 100 or more years old, though no one could be exact about it. Mr. Peatybog, the postmaster in the shriveled village, said how he could recall when the circular window on the second-story landing hadn't been there, and Mrs. Bliss said she knew that at one time what was now the kitchen had been a tap room because her father had told her about it. The heart of the house, as Denny's father put it, was very old, but people had altered it and added on and covered up. Denny's father had added the room where the heads were hung, but Denny's playroom must have been the original attic, because where the rafters of its high abrupt ceiling were visible, the nails in them were square-headed, and here and there the timbers were still held together with wooden pegs. But the playroom where Denny also slept appeared, to the casual glance, anything but old. The floor was carpeted in blue, the curtains were yellow, and the bedspread blue and white. The wallpaper which his mother had chosen for him before she left was yellow willow trees on a pale blue ground. And to an alien eye the butterflies pinned on the walls seemed part of the design. It had been a long time since Denny's father had been up in the room, and although he knew that his son's collection of Lepidoptera, as he called them, was pinned upon the walls, he did not know, and therefore could not reprimand his son for the damage they had done to the pretty wallpaper. Under each specimen a putty-colored blot was spreading over the blue paper. It was oil, exuding from the drying bodies of the dead insects. In one corner of the room was a chintz-covered chest in which lay the remains of Denny's earlier loves, battered trains and sections of track, an old transformer, batteries covered with cavern-like crystals of zinc, salts, trucks, and windmills no longer recognizable as much more than haphazard wooden arrangements of fitted blocks and sticks, books crumpled and torn with Denny's name or current dream, scrawled aggressively in crayon across the print and pictures, a gyroscope, a rubber ball, its cracked paint making a mosaic of antique red and gold around its sphere, and somewhere, at the bottom, weighed down with tin and lead and wood, more than any corpse, with earth and grass, lay a bear, a monkey, and a boy doll with a scar across one cheek, where Denny had kicked it with a skate. In another corner, the symbols of his present were proudly displayed. The butterfly net leaned against the wall, and close to the floor on a wooden box turned upside down stood Denny's cyanide bottle, tweezers, and pins, the last shining as dangerously bright as minute surgical instruments in their packet of black paper. After almost a year of collecting butterflies, Denny had found that a certain equivocal quality could be added to his pursuit if he were to collect not only the butterflies but also the earlier stages of their mutations. By cramming milk bottles, shoe boxes, and whatever other receptacle the house might offer with caterpillars and pupae, he was, in the case of those that survived, able to participate in a sort of alchemy. Intently he would squat on his haunches and gaze into the receptacles, studying the laborious transformations, the caterpillar shedding skin, the exudation that is used to hitch its shroud-like chrysalid to twigs or undersides of leaves, and then the final unpredictable attainment of the imago. It was like opening a surprise package, for as yet Denny had not learned to tell what color, size, or shape worm would turn into a dog's head sulfur morning cloak or tiger swallowtail. As late summer approached, Denny insisted that the servant girl refrain from opening the windows wide in order to air out his room. The sudden change in temperature, he said, would disturb the caterpillars and pupae. Even though the girl reported to his father that Denny's room smelled unhealthily from all the bugs and things, the man did no more than mention it to Denny in an offhand manner. Denny grunted to show that he had heard, and did no more about it. And, as his father was writing a book on his jungles and crags and beasts, he had really very little concern about what went on upstairs. So it was that an acrid smell of decaying vegetable matter, resolving itself into insect flesh, pervaded Denny's bright attic room, and the oily blotches on the walls beneath his specimens spread over so slightly, discoloring the paper more and more. In a book, Butterflies You Ought to Know Better, which an aunt had sent him for Christmas, Denny read that a suitable castle for a caterpillar could be made by placing a lamp chimney closest at the top upon a flower pot filled with earth. He prepared this enclosure, purchasing the lamp chimney from the village store with his own money. It was such an elegant contrivance, and yet so magical, that he decided to save it for an especially unusual specimen. It was not until late October that Denny found one worthy of the castle. He was exploring a copse behind the fields. Because of the stoniness of the ground, it had never been cultivated, and lay like a sword between the fertility of the fields on either side. Denny had never trespassed on it before, and dared to now only because of his growing self-confidence in his power over nature. A month ago he would have shied away from the area entirely, even taking the precaution to circumvent the 2 fields enclosing it. But he felt a little now the way he thought God must feel when, abject within its glass and cardboard world, the life he watched took form, changed and ceased. Protected from unpleasant touch or any unpredictable action, Denny watched the metamorphosis from worm to chrysalid to miraculously vibrant petal. It lay within his power to sever abruptly the magical chain of their evolution at any point he chose. In a little way he was a little like God. It was this conceit that now gave him the courage to climb over the stones of the old wall and enter the half-acre of dense woodland. The autumn sun, already low, ogled the brittle landscape like some improbable jack-o'-lantern hanging in the west. What birds were still in the country spoke in the rasping tone of the herd. The more mellifluous and prosperous had already gone south, although the leaves on the trees displayed the incautious yellow of senility and ochres of decay. The underbrush, such as catbrier and wild grape, were mostly green. Armed with his forceps and his omnipotence, Denny explored each living leaf and twig. Brambles tore his stockings and scratched his knees, but except for vulgar tent caterpillars and the wild cherry trees, Denny's efforts went unwarranted. It was dusk when, searching among the speculatively shaped leaves of a sassafras, Denny found a specimen beyond his most arrogant expectations. At first sight, due in part to the twilight, it looked more like some